There's a specific kind of person the world has completely wrong. They don't text back immediately. They cancel plans sometimes. They go quiet for weeks and then reappear like nothing happened. And people around them have already decided what that means. Weird. Cold. Antisocial. Broken. But here's what nobody talks about. Some of the most emotionally intelligent, deeply feeling, acutely aware people on this planet are the ones who socialize the least. And that's not a coincidence. Think about the last time you were in a room full of people and felt completely alone. Not because no one was talking to you, but because nothing anyone was saying actually meant anything. You were surrounded by noise and still felt an emptiness you couldn't explain. Like you were watching everyone through glass, present in the room but absent from the moment. If that hit somewhere specific inside you, stay with me. Because this isn't a video about introversion. This isn't another, it's okay to be shy, pep talk. And it's definitely not about labeling anyone. This is about what's actually happening inside the minds of people who've quietly chosen distance. And why that choice is far more psychologically sophisticated than the world gives them credit for. Here's something that might make you uncomfortable. Most people socialize not because they genuinely want to connect, but because the silence scares them. They fill their calendars, their group chats, their weekends, because being alone forces them to sit with themselves. And that's terrifying for a lot of people. They need the noise. They need the plans. They need constant proof that someone out there wants them around. But the person who rarely socializes? They've already made peace with that silence. They've sat in it, explored it, and discovered that solitude isn't emptiness, it's actually one of the clearest spaces a human mind can exist in. And that changes everything about how they move through the world. What you're about to hear might feel like someone finally put words to something you've been carrying for years. Something you never quite knew how to explain to people who just didn't get it. 8 psychological truths about people who rarely socialize, and why the world has been reading them completely wrong this entire time. Here's the first thing people get wrong. They assume that someone who avoids socializing must not like people. But that's not it at all. The truth is far more interesting, and far more human. People who rarely socialize don't hate connection. They hate what usually passes for it. Think about what most social interactions actually look like. A room full of people talking about nothing. Surface-level questions recycled 100 times. Conversations that start and end without a single real moment between two human beings. How are you? Good. You? Yeah, good. For some people, that's enough. It fills something. It keeps the silence away. But for the person who rarely socializes, that kind of exchange doesn't just feel empty, it feels like a slow drain on something they can't easily refill. And here's what psychology actually shows about this. Their nervous system isn't wired for casual stimulation. It's wired for depth. When they're in a conversation that actually means something, where someone is being real, honest, unfiltered, their brain lights up completely differently than it does during small talk. The reward is real. The connection is real. But it's rare. And because it's rare, they'd rather wait for it than settle for noise. Ask yourself this. Have you ever left a social gathering feeling more exhausted than when you arrived, even though nothing bad happened? Even though people were kind and the night was fine? That exhaustion isn't weakness. It's information. It means your brain was working the entire time. Tracking tone shifts. Reading between lines. Noticing the pause that lasted a half second too long. The word someone chose that didn't quite match their expression. Most people don't catch any of that. But you did. You always do. Psychologists call this heightened social processing. And while it makes social environments genuinely draining, it also makes these people extraordinarily perceptive. They read rooms most people can't. They sense tension before it surfaces. They understand what someone meant underneath what they actually said. The very thing that exhausts them is also what makes them deeply intuitive. But the world doesn't reward that quietly. It rewards the loudest person in the room. The one always available. Always present. Always performing. And for someone wired this way, that kind of performance feels completely pointless. Which leads to something even deeper. There's a specific kind of loneliness nobody talks about. It's not the loneliness of being alone. It's the loneliness of being surrounded by people who will never quite understand how your mind works. People who look at your silence and see a problem. People who interpret your distance as rejection when it has nothing to do with them at all. That's the loneliness people who rarely socialize actually carry. And it's heavy in a way that's almost impossible to explain to someone who's never felt it. Because from the outside, everything looks like a choice. And it is. But what people miss is why the choice gets made. It's not avoidance. It's protection. There's a difference, and that difference matters enormously. When you've spent years showing up fully in conversations that went nowhere. When you've opened up to people who didn't know what to do with your honesty. When you've sat in rooms full of laughter and still felt like a stranger, you stop spending energy carelessly. You start guarding it. Not because you gave up on people. But because you finally started taking seriously what certain interactions were costing you. And nobody teaches you that it's okay to do that. Nobody stands up and says, your energy is valuable. Your attention is valuable. The version of you that shows up fully deserves to be in a room that's worth showing up fully for. Instead, the world tells you to push through. Stay connected. Reach out more. Be more available. As if the solution to feeling drained by shallow connection is simply more of it. But that logic has never made sense to people wired this way. And deep down, they've always known it. Here's what makes it even more complicated. These people often care deeply. More than they show. More than most would ever guess. When someone earns their trust, genuinely earns it, the connection runs in ways that most casual relationships never reach. They don't give pieces of themselves easily. But when they do, it's the whole thing. Every layer. No performance. No filter. That's why their circle is small. Not because they failed at relationships. But because they refuse to fake them. Think about that for a second. In a world that rewards performance, that prioritizes appearances, that mistakes busyness for fulfillment, choosing authenticity over access takes a quiet kind of courage most people never develop. And yet they're still the ones labeled as cold. Distant. Difficult. There's something quietly painful about being misread by the very people who claim to know you. About having your boundaries mistaken for rejection. About someone interpreting your need for space as proof that you don't care, when the reality is that you care so deeply that you can't afford to be careless with it. That paradox lives inside a lot of people who rarely socialize. They feel everything intensely. They just don't broadcast it. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you were fully present with someone? Not half listening while scrolling. Not waiting for your turn to speak. But actually there, locked in, genuinely invested in another human being. For people who rarely socialize, that's the only version of connection worth having. Anything less feels like going through motions. And they'd rather sit in silence than go through motions with someone who isn't really paying attention anyway. And here's what that actually reflects, not dysfunction. Not damage. But an extraordinarily high standard for what human connection should feel like. A standard most people abandoned somewhere along the way because it was easier to accept less. These people never accepted less. And that costs them socially. But it protects something inside them that most people quietly lose over time. Here's the uncomfortable truth the world isn't ready for. Some people aren't broken because they need less social contact. Some people are simply operating at a frequency that most environments aren't built for. And rather than lower themselves to fit the noise, they choose silence. They choose solitude. Not as punishment. Not as hiding. But as a standard. Because they've realized something most people spend their whole lives running from. You can be alone without being lonely. And you can be surrounded by people and feel completely invisible. The number of people in your life has never been the measure of its depth. If you've watched this far and felt something shift, like this described a part of you that you've never heard named out loud, then you already know this wasn't just a psychology video. It was a mirror. And if someone in your life is this way, a quieter, more selective, slower to reach out, maybe now you'll see them differently. Not as someone pulling away, but as someone who only comes closer when it actually means something. That's not a flaw. That's not something that needs fixing. That's one of the rarest, most quietly powerful things a person can be. Drop a comment below and tell me which part of this described you the most. Because I read every single one. And if this felt like something someone in your life needed to hear, share it with them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for a quiet person is simply show them they're understood. The next video goes even deeper. And if this one resonated, that one is going to stop you completely.